Beautiful. Thanks for everybody joining. Really good attendance again, just like this morning. So Bruce Calder here. I'm the VP of Consulting Services at Claigan, and I'll be your host again today. I'm going to be talking SCIP, Substance of Concern in Products, Operational Processes. Fun stuff. But it's going to be a really frank discussion on SCIP compliance. We're going to talk about specifics. We've done this for so many companies, and there are a lot of practical elements that are worth really discussing, especially a lot of the work you'll end up doing that you might not even know you'll end up doing at this point in time. So I'm going to talk about a variety of things, a little bit of introduction, which is kind of what I'm doing sort of right now. I'm going to talk about a little bit the SCIP timeline to understand, again, the timeline pressures and the practicalities that come out of that. I'm going to talk about the Simplified SCIP Notification, SSN. So this is important because it's driving really the end outputs. This is the idea that everyone who provides a product in Europe has to be registered in the system for SCIP if the product contains a component with an SVHC above 0.1% by weight, which includes not only the manufacturer, but also the distributor. So you're set in a situation where a distributor cannot sell your product unless they have your SCIP number or a confirmation that it does not require it because there's no SVHCs. So because they cannot sell without your SCIP number, because they not only need your SCIP number, they actually have to do something with it. They have to enter it also into the IUCLID database and get back a number of their own. They need to register themselves to the product. If not, they cannot sell it. That inability to sell really drives a lot of the operational part. So a lot of people are focusing on, hey, I got to find my SVHCs. That's part of it, but that's early on in the process. Eventually, you have to submit, get back a number, and then you have to have these numbers available in a way they can provide it to someone else that they can not only have it, but they can use it, submit it in a system, and get back a number of their own. Otherwise, they cannot sell the product. So we're going to talk about a lot of that. I meant to update the process. I missed the whole letter S there. We'll say it's budget cutting. I'll fix that in the final version everybody gets. Then creating a SCIP declaration. I'm going to talk about the technical side and then look more at the outputs. We're a huge fan at Claigan here of outputs. What's the end output? And then how do you get there? And we're going to talk about the technical outputs and we'll talk about the final outputs. The final outputs may not be exactly what you're expecting. I'll talk about a few new changes in SCIP and some of the ramifications in practicality. And then I'll talk about the bugaboo, or sort of the elephant in the room, and that's the miscellaneous category. So you're going to sell a lot of products, and you probably focus on your main products. But funnily enough, if you actually look at the number of SKUs or part numbers you sell into Europe, you'll probably realize your main products are actually only a small percentage of those SKUs. Between spares, repairs, consumables, so on and so forth, there are a lot of other SKUs. They all count. So how do you handle this incredible miscellaneous category, which is a big fundamental part of the whole thing? Where you basically sell your product, awesome, it's in SCIP. Now can you sell your consumables and stuff with it? Are they in SCIP, or have you determined what they have to be? No? Well, they can't be sold. So the miscellaneous category is something people haven't necessarily taken into account. It really helps if you've done a lot of this, like we have, where it's not just the SVHCs and the chemicals and the fancy names like the chlorine plus and the cyclosiloxanes and funky chemical names like that. There's a lot of pure operation. So we're going to talk a lot more about the operational stuff. So the idea here is for the webinar to be 50 minutes with another 10 minutes Q&A at the end. This morning I ran a little over length, not too bad, and there were a phenomenal amount of questions. So please submit your questions during, and I'll try to get to as many as I can in the control panel. There was quite a few this morning, so I'll see what I can do. There's a lot of gaps in knowledge, in guidance, and then once you go down the path, one of the challenges ECHA has right now is they haven't really done any declarations of their own, so they haven't walked the path. So they don't know about all the forks in the road. So they're generally quite a bit behind all the practical elements. They're getting feedback, but a lot of people giving them feedback also haven't done it. So they don't know about all the forks in the road. So it helps. We'll talk about a lot of the forks in the road. Of course, about ourselves, Claigan, we do a tremendous amount of laboratory testing, especially for new products or the restrictions, ROHS, REACH restrictions, POP, things that product ban. Yes, testing is incredibly useful and accurate for each SVHC, but not necessarily as viable in the short time frame we have for all of your legacy products. So, but if you need laboratory testing, especially for any of the requirements, EU medical device regulation, we're one of the top providers in the world. Just context. We just have to know what the product is, to quote it. If you like about our knowledge base or talking about, maybe not my grammar, but maybe my knowledge base, our knowledge base, monthly and quarterly updates. This is where we sit down every month or every quarter and go over what's changed. Here are the new SVHCs. This is why they are or not in your product. Here's the new Chinese VOC regulation, how it affects a lot of your products indirectly and how that all works, and so on and so forth. And you ask questions and it's interactive. So one of the challenges with today, it isn't really interactive. If you ask questions, you put it in the control panel, and then I read them out and answer them. It's not super interactive. The monthly or quarterly updates, you actually get to ask questions in real time. We go back and forth. We talk about your product. It's really handy. And it's probably one of the most cost-efficient services you'll ever see because there's a tremendous amount of information in it. But we already do this for 70 to 80 companies. I can't remember exactly. So you get to benefit from that incredible wealth of knowledge, and it makes it deeper and more cost efficient for everybody. And of course, what we're talking about today, SCIP web demonstration templates. We'll talk about our process. It's really good. We first walk you through the rules, and then we take one of your products and we review it with you and create a declaration with you in Excel and then iEuclid and all the different outputs. And with the different templates, the product templates and the building blocks, the component templates, and explain exactly how it's done and create. And no matter what direction you go, how much you use testing or supplier data gathering, or more commonly right now, engineering review, it's extremely useful for anybody. So the main topic today is fundamentally substance of concern in articles as are such in complex objects products. Manufacturers have to register their products and their SVHCs in their products in iEuclid by Jan 5th, 2021. More specifically, if any component in your product has an SVHC above 0.1% by weight, the product, the component, and the SVHC have to go in the system by Jan 5th, 2021. Out of the system, you have a SCIP number. That SCIP number will have to go to anyone else selling your product so they can register that SCIP number under their own name and get their own. I'll explain that. That's mostly the simplified process. Simplified's kind of an open-ended view on the thing. We'll talk about that more. So there really are two parts to software. There's the software part to create the file, which is like 95% of the work. It's actually creating the technical or the iEuclid file. Sometimes they call it dossier, and create that file to register in November. So the second part of the software is the registration system, which is supposed to be ready by the end of October now, which means realistically registering in November. The current software is being replaced by a slightly newer version momentarily. It's already been approved, just not quite released. There'll be full backwards compatibility with everything you've done up until now. There's some very small changes to the fields, and it's pretty well the system that's going to be creates the files for the final registration in November. So whatever you're creating today, whether the very first prototype, the second version of the prototype, they'll all be usable for registering products into the database come November. The software itself for registration is not supposed to be available until the end of October. That's the current time frame. So just a reminder about the time frame. January is now less than 4 months away, let alone less than 6. We're literally closer in time to the deadline to when the Tiger King was first released. So Tiger King, that sort of very strange phenomenon, which wasn't that long ago, is actually farther away in time now than we are to the end deadline. So just realize we're getting closer and closer to the deadline. There's not a lot of time. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about here is very practical approaches. I mean, you can make this as complicated as you feel like. We're not big fans of that. We have to look at the outputs. How the best way to get to the output? What's the best and most effective way? Cost and quality is a good balancing act to get to that end. One of the things that's affecting this is the distributor element. This is actually a fairly significant compliance difference from other regulations. And it's a simplified SCIP notification, which it looks like I'm underlining because it's a really important sentence coming up. It's not, it's just hyperlinked. The name of the guidance on the simplified SCIP notification is the tools to refer to SCIP data already submitted to ECHA. Thanks, guys. Basically, every provider of a product in Europe has to provide the reach SVHC data to the recipient, of which in the guidance, registering in a database like SCIP is an allowed method. So basically all brand owners, so brand owners are or manufacturers, they would say manufacturers. A manufacturer in Europe is the brand owner. It's the company selling the product under its own brand. So whether or not they designed or made the product themselves, it doesn't matter. It's the brand owner selling the product is responsible for registering. However, a distributor of the product also has to register in the system. Now, the brand owner would submit the file, we'll talk about all the technical information, also called the dossier, and get back a number. The distributor only has to submit the manufacturer's number to get back a number of its own. So that's a big difference, where the output isn't some poor soul sitting in a closet somewhere that rubber stamps the product and says, now it's magically compliant. You actually have to have a number linked to a publicly available file that you have to be able to provide in a form that can be used by the next person to submit the number into the system to get it back. So that changes the outputs. The output isn't the registration anymore. It's the end output is having the number available in a way it can be provided, which registration is one of the steps to it. But really the end output, you're not done if you can't provide the SCIP numbers to people who ask. So that is a big difference. And it has to be provided in a way they can use it. You know, putting it, some people, hey, we wrote it in our PDF for the Declaration of Conformity. A, does it belong in a declaration of conformity? It's CE marking. This is not CE marking. 2, are they going to really have to try to transcribe or copy this 30+ digit strange number out of your DOC? You're looking more at an Excel solution. So this is kind of a simplified version in a way that it's not simple at all. So anybody can create the file. We can create the file for you, which you do all the time. And it's the I6Z file that you register. You can just email it to someone else. It's very portable. When you register it, it's literally a drag drop operation. I take the file, I slide it in, and I let go, and it registers. That'll be November. Right now, you create the file. Anybody can create the file. We can create the file. Your US entity can create the file. A Chinese entity can create the file. The submission, though, has to be done by a European entity. So in this case, the parent company, we'll say Acme, created the dossier, and it was submitted by their French entity, Acme France. So they submitted into the full notification, the dossier, into the system, and they got back a SCIP number. Awesome, they have a SCIP number. And they can share that number with the other divisions of the same company because they don't have a provider responsibility amongst companies of the same mother company. But when they provide it to a distributor, they have to provide, the distributor needs the SCIP number so they can submit it in the system and get back a SCIP number of their own. So the French distributor submits the system, gets back their own SCIP number. That's a key part of the whole thing. So you need the Acme entities need the SCIP number available they can provide to the distributor to submit in the system and get back their own number. Otherwise, the distributor cannot sell. So a lot of people say, hey, how have the national authorities transcribed the legislation, and so on and so forth. It's EU deadlines, which means whether they've transcribed or not, it's still enforceable back to the date the unit was placed in the market. So even if it's not transcribed until, I don't know, July in the legislation, if you weren't compliant back in February, they can get you in August. But that's not how the national authorities are going to work. Really, enforcement for the national authorities works in 2 ways. A, somebody rats you out. And since it's a public database, that is 100% going to happen, where they identify so-and-so is not in the database, and they identify that to the national authority, and the national authority is required to follow up on a notification from one of their own citizens. The second way they enforce is through their own surveillance programs, which basically in year 1, they create a budget and a plan of what they're going to test for in year 2, and then in year 3 justify they spent their money on what they said they're going to do in year 1. So really any organized enforcement by national authorities is year 2, and it just has to do with their budgeting system. In year 1, they'll figure out what they're going to do and budget for it, get it approved, and do it in year 2. The real enforcement is the fact that the distributor cannot sell it without the SCIP number, or if there's no SVHCs, so it does not have to be in the SCIP database. Again, if you have no SVHCs, about 0.1% by weight in any component, you don't have to go in the database. So you don't need a SCIP number. So either the distributor needs a SCIP number or confirmation that a SCIP number is not required. And they cannot sell the product without that. That is the real de facto enforcement. And it's no longer somebody sitting in a little closet who creates a little file in a PDF that shows the product's compliant. You have to be able to provide SCIP numbers to the people that need it in a way they can use it. Otherwise, they cannot sell. When often we talk about a lot of stakeholders like yourselves in the company talk to executive about restricted materials, often their eyes glaze over and they just ask how much and then say it's way too much. It's a little bit different because once you start saying, hey, we're not going to be able to ship, distributors won't be able to sell, it has a different resonance with the executive. So it is very different. There's very much communication to the outside world part that involves being able to provide something tangible they can use. So it's quite a bit different. So what does the distributor have to do with it? It gives you a much better idea of what you need to provide. They can either, if you look down at the bottom here, they can submit the SCIP numbers one at a time. And they're really easy to remember numbers like 94683F5A 1D604C. It just rolls right off the tongue. These are 100% going to be a copy paste. If you can do these by memory, that's special. So they can enter these one at a time or paste them in one at a time. They submit this number and they get back a number of their own. Awesome. Or you can give them an Excel file where one of the columns are your SCIP numbers. They can upload the Excel file and get back a new file of a new list of SCIP numbers of their own. And that's more commonly the way it's going to be handled. Whether or not, here are all the SKUs I sell you, here's the SCIP number per SKU, and NA where it's not applicable, or realistically, some companies just go with, look, you can sell every SKU we own, so here are our 22 SCIP numbers, you upload in the system, then you'll have all of them. Deal? So that is the other way to do it. And of course, the requirement is as long as they upload, as long as they identify the SCIP numbers and register under their name, they're compliant. So we're looking at distributors either listing the individual SCIP number or uploading a file of SCIP numbers. Also realize in many cases, you may be a brand owner, a manufacturer, but you may often, it's very common, sell someone else's product with yours. If it's integrated in your system, in your product, you normally include it in your product SCIP number. So not a big deal. But many companies sell things in parallel, consumables that belong to someone else, a router, a laptop, whatever else that's really another brand owner's. The compliance is another brand owner's. So in that case, you'd be the distributor of that brand owner's product. So you need their SCIP number to register in the database like this to get your own SCIP number for it. And boy, this is going to be fun with guys like purchasing. Hey, guys, when you buy something that you sell with our product, yeah, you decide, hey, you're going to send Ethernet cables to their product. We either have to include it in our SCIP notification for our product, or we need the SCIP number from the supplier so we can put it in the system to get our own SCIP number. One of those things has to happen. It'll be different types of controls. This is really the de facto enforcement. It's not, oh yeah, somebody rubber stamped it, it looks good on the sheet, nobody outside checks it, it's fine. Nope, this one, not only is the database public, which is a big part of it, the next person in the chain needs the SCIP number to be able to sell it. So it's a big deal. So the end goal is a lot of companies focus on the horseshoe, the bottom half. What you really have to do is, what are you selling in Europe? What are the SKUs you sell in Europe? Of those SKUs, what are the declarable components? So which components of SVHCs? Not each individual one, strangely enough. You're mostly going to be doing it by component type. So whether you have a lead and brass connector, lead and brass standoff, lead and brass prong in your product, they're all lead and brass. You'd have a lead and brass component, and that particular product would have 3 of them. And you identify how many of each generic declarable SVHC component you have. And there's only about 30 or 40 of them total possible. And most products only have at most 10 to 15 declarable component types. A lot of products, you got to have circuit boards, you'll have a lot of high temp solder. Exemption 7A under ROHS is high temp solder. It's leaded solder. It's allowed under ROHS, but it's an SVHC declarable. If you look at it, and most products have around 2 on average per circuit board. You have enough circuit board, it adds up. But all you have to do is say, hey, we have 10 instances of high temp solder, and here's the high temp solder template in our declaration. And we'll explain all the templates. So you have to identify the declarable components. Then you create product and component templates. We'll explain. The whole system is built on a hierarchy. The product is the top level. So I'm going to use an example today of a laptop, because a laptop is a really good example because it's right in front of us. Or you could be a desktop. But imagine the laptop right in front of you. The laptop or laptop family encompassing a range of parts and products would go in the system. You can have one listing encompassing a range of products under certain rules. In it, you'll have, depending on how many accessories you sell with it, between 2 and 4 leaded brass components. If you have a hard drive, the old school hard drive, you almost always have a shock sensor. For example, when you drop a laptop on the ground, if you have the old hard drives, not the new solid state stuff, there's a piece that spins. There's literally a disc that's spinning in there. And there's a little reader, there's a little arm, a little actuator that reads, moves around, it physically moves to read stuff off the hard drive. If it gets impact landing on the ground, the actuator could drive right through your hard drive and destroy it. So there's a little shock sensor, piezo material, that under stress, it changes the electrical current in it, and it'll automatically make the actuator pull away and not smash the hard drive. So, but this is PZT, perfectly allowed. It's lead zirconate titanate. It's just a declarable SVHC. Neat thing to do with your laptop right now, and don't do it too hard. I don't want to be the reason your laptop's broken. But if you take your laptop's monitor right now and twist it slightly, you'll notice it bends. Yeah, take your monitor and flex it. And it could be a LCD screen. You have like a stand-up one, and it flexes. That means it's not really glass. It's the back layer is polymethyl methacrylate or another material, but usually PMMA. And the way it works is a little bit different than in television. So most flat screen TVs today, the LEDs, the lights are shining directly at you. They're on the back panel. If you open up a TV, which you do all the time, you'll notice that these little LEDs in the back, they're usually orange because the active part of it, a lot of modern LEDs is orange. And then it'll have a little bit of a diffuser on it, and then it looks like little flowers often around it to help spread the light. It shines forward into the LCD screen. The LCD screen blocks certain colors, and that makes the pattern you see on the TV. And so the LEDs are shining straight at you while you're sitting on the couch or wherever else. Laptop one's quite different. Your laptop one is much thinner. So if you look at your TV, even though it's a thin screen now, it's still got a couple inches of thickness. The LEDs are behind it, and they have room to shine out towards you. Your laptop monitor is usually pretty thin these days. And so what it ends up having to do is the LEDs in your laptop are mostly around the bottom. So where, down at the bottom, it says like Dell or MacBook Pro or Lenovo, down at the bottom of your LCD screen, and they're shining upwards. They're actually shining up towards the ceiling, not towards your eyes. They're shining up towards the ceiling, and they go through a PMMA waveguide. And that's the very back panel of the LCD. Well, the very back panel is the metal or plastic part you can touch with your hands right now. One layer inside is usually the PMMA layer, and it guides the light upwards and then changes the direction of it by 90 degrees and shines it out towards your eyes. So the LEDs are in a bank along the bottom pointed upwards, and it goes up the light guides, and which turn it 90 degrees at specific locations and shine it back in your eyes. And that's how it works. For a variety of reasons, this kind of panel, being a plastic, it needs a UV stabilizer, otherwise it'll degrade. And if the light guide degrades, your panel's not going to work terribly well. Perfectly fine, not banned, but if you have UV 320 or UV 328 or one of the SVHCs, which is the common version, you just have to declare. So you got to identify all the declarable component types. Once you've created the product component templates, which we normally do in Excel, because human beings are better with Excel, you build the I6Z file in iEuclid, which is really a point and click. You put the product's name, it's the product the parts it encompasses. In consumers, it's basically the different UPC codes this list encompasses. Professional products have a wider options. You list those, the customs code, and then how many of each declarable component you have, and then attach the component declaration for each. People are like, well, I got 10,000 parts. I'm going to have 10,000 declarations. What you do is you create generic ones for each type. Lead and brass is the type, and it will encompass a large percentage of your declarations. So in the laptop, you basically say we have between 2 and 4 lead and brass parts, depending on how you've kitted or accessorized this thing. We have 2 PZT shock sensors, etc. We have 1 screen with UV 320. And you make it generic. So you go to your next product you make, which is very similar. It will just have a different count of basically the same declarable components. And so once you create these component templates, which we'll explain and show, they have all the technical information. It's just a matter of saying, I have 5 of these, 4 of these, 2 of those, etc. You'll create I6Z files, then you're going to want to review them. So one of the fundamental rules of restricted materials compliance is the restricted materials prime can do anything they want as long as it's free. If the requirement for SCIP is to declare, as long as you declare, you're compliant. One of the most common approaches is do the worst case scenario declaration. I don't know if all my brass parts have lead, but if I declare them all as leaded, I'm compliant. If the business does not like that, we can do more work to determine which ones are, working with suppliers or testing. But as long as we declare, we're compliant. If the business wishes us to do more work to determine whether or not the protective film that you peel off the monitor when you put it into service actually has trinonyl phenol phosphite. We can do that, but it takes money. And so if it's a business decision, then it's a different thing. But as long as you declare, you're compliant. So it's usually a review process. Are you happy that we're going to say keep out of reach of children? And it's a standard risk phrase for lead. You okay with that? Not okay with that? Okay, so what are we going to do here? And you're not going to have a lot of time. So you want to create some of these I6 Ed files earlier, review it with the business, and then in November or a little bit later, you just drag, drop, and submit the files in iUclid, and you get back a SCIP number. You can get back the SCIP number at the time, or you'll literally be able to push a button and export the SCIP numbers for all the products you have registered. It's kind of an easy part of the system. Then you're going to have to put them in a format where you can use them. And normally it's something like, here are all the SKUs I sell. Here's a second column with all the applicable SCIP numbers or not applicable, either of no SVHCs or historical or obsolete products. So when I'm asked, I can provide this. So the real goal is going from here are the things I sell, here is the Excel list of SCIP numbers by thing I sell. The end goal is not the registration. That is actually a major technical element of it. But at the end of the day, what you need to provide the outside world is a number. And all this work gets you to that number. Now, main requirement, as I said, is to declare. As long as you declare, get in the system, and you've done it honestly, you've met the main compliance requirement. You haven't necessarily met all of them. They could disagree with your declaration, and they may ask you to change it, but it's not a stop ship issue. They'll ask you to change it, and you just change it in the future or whatever is decided upon. But the main stop ship requirement's about not declaring. Especially when a new system like this, there's a lot of leeway on how well you declared. As long as you're in the system and honestly, then the main punishment, if you're not correct, is really to update in the future. Get some requests to make a change of some sort or another. One of the other things, or one of our bigger concepts, especially for new things, is hanging together instead of hanging separately. If you're going to be wrong in good company. And so a lot of people are doing this and getting into the system. Doing it our way is a good way to do it. If something's wrong in it, you're wrong in a good company. And if everybody's wrong, nobody's wrong. It's kind of an interesting way to look at it. This is so new. Even the national authorities have no idea what they're doing. Even ECA really doesn't have any idea what they're doing. They're getting feedback, they're making adjustments, but they really haven't created many files or any files really of their own. So they don't completely understand all the forks in the road. So there's a lot of understanding. You just want to do it correctly, get the declaration in correctly, honestly, and in a format that basically other people are using. So if you're wrong, you're all wrong, which means nobody's wrong. And there might be an update requirement in the future. So again, the end goal is often we focus on, you need a list of what you sell and the SCIP number for it. That's what the next entity is going to need. That's what compliance means to them. It's not a certificate of compliance. It is, I need your SCIP number to enter in the system so I get my own SCIP number. You can sit there and explain, but the distributor could say, you know what, you can explain all you want about the chemicals in it, and I'm going to gloss over or may not understand, or may personally find it interesting, but realistically, I just want the number. So how do we do this? This is the technical side. So we really do it in 3 phases, and we've done this for so many companies. It is easily the best way to do this. I am super biased, by the way, but it really is. I hate doing things that don't work. It just sucks. A lot of people do this, it's a job, a business, or whichever. I prefer to actually do a good job at the end of the day. I like things that work. Things that don't work, I'm just not a fan of. So this works. What we try to do first is we establish the basics. We create a declaration with you. We show you how to do it, and we create one with you. Here is a declaration. We will actually explain the rules, take one your product, do an engineering evaluation where you walk through your product and identify what SVHCs could be there. The worst case, it's called the worst case scenario declaration. It's perfectly allowed, based on the materials you're using. And then we create a declaration for it in the product template in Excel, in the component templates in Excel, and then the iUclid files will have the component templates in it too, which will explain, and create a file for you. And then you have all the tools to do it yourself, but we've also agreed on the process and tools. And so it's actually very easy for us to do any of your products for you. It does take work, but once you put the foundation in, it is a educated technical counting exercise. It's not that bad. It's technical, and having someone like ourselves do it is really helpful. It also helps that we have a very significant test lab. Not that we use testing for all this, it's just we have this incredible compilation of what products really have and what's real and what's not. And then eventually you'll register. You say, well, why can't you do it? A lot of companies, well, can you register for us? Yeah, but you're not going to want us to. And we've been through so many registrations now, Euclid, over time, is you're going to end up with a password. When, as much as you say, hey, you guys should register for us because it's a big unknown, when you eventually take it to the business and push comes to shove at the end, they're saying, like, let's not give people our password and our user ID for the company. So you end up doing it. It is literally a drag drop exercise. We can web meeting in behind you and help you if you run into a snag. But it's literally, you need a European Union entity, you need to register the system, and then you literally drag a file and drop it into the system, and you get back a SCIP number. And also, if you don't remember what SCIP numbers you just got, you can export all the SCIP numbers under your file. It's really not that hard, but we can super support you. If you want to give us your password, do it, no problem. We can definitely do it, but we find by and large companies like to keep their own passwords and user IDs. But it's a drag drop exercise. We can definitely support you through it. It's not going to be a big deal. What's more of a big deal is you're going to get customers, or especially other OEMs, that ask you really detailed questions about your products and have some custom form you have to fill in for each one. We'll talk about how to handle that later. Okay, so I don't know whose product this is. I actually just took it right off the web. I just put medical or laboratory test equipment or something in Google, and that's the picture I got. So there it is. But the product, we've analyzed a lot of products like this, and this is pretty typical for what declarables they have based on the materials. Lead and high temp solder. One of the main common diode has a solder connection inside. So because the solder connection is inside the chip, when the chip is soldered onto a board, if they use the same solder inside as outside, it would melt a second time, which is not very popular if the inside of your chip remelts when you solder onto the board. So they have to use a solder with a higher melting point, so it doesn't remelt when you're soldering on the board. And if using tin solder on the board, the higher melting point solders is nearly 100% lead. It's allowed under ROHS. Yeah, I know it's lead, but it's allowed. Exemption 7A, high temp solder. It's allowed. You just have to declare it. And your typical complex product will have tons of these. It's pretty normal. It's declarable. And high temp solder, perfectly common declarable, just declare. Lead and brass components, you'll have them in connectors, you'll have them in the prongs in your power cord, you'll have them inside the brick for your internal power supply, you'll have them in standoffs, you'll have them in a fluidic or gas components. Super common. Lead and brass, you just have a declarable template and you say, hey, we have 30, or in the new system, 20 to 40, you actually can put a range of lead and brass components. Silicone rubber is very different than the other polymers. So when you have polycarbonate, which is made from bisphenol A phosgene repeating until it's terminated with tert-butylphenol. Tert-butylphenol keeps the chain length to a certain length, which controls its how brittle it is and how durable it is. Tert-butylphenol and bisphenol A both reach SVHCs, but when they're fully reacted together, the amount of BPA or tert-butylphenol is like sub 10 ppm. The actual plastic now is polycarbonate. So when you mix polycarbonate, more than 50% of it is actually SVHC monomers that are fully polymerized now, and it's a different chemical. And so they're not declarable. If we test polycarbonate for BPA, even though it's made from, like 40% of it was made from BPA, there's less than 10 parts per million BPA in the end. Thermoset curing plastic is quite different. So silicone rubber is normally made from siloxane rubber, D6. Siloxane rubber is then cured, and you eventually get silicone rubber. Because the curing process, it's not the same as polymerization, it ends up with quite a bit more residual monomer. So most silicone rubbers have between 400 and 1300 ppm D6. So we'll be just above or just below the declarable level. So silicone components, as long as you declare D6, you're compliant. And then I'll have tons of others. I'll have UV stabilizers like 320 or 320 in the LCD screen. If you have a protective film on your product that you pull off, say the screen when you put it into service, they usually use an antioxidant called trisnonylphenol phosphite, just an SVHC. If you use relays and switches, you'll often have cadmium in there and cadmium contacts, lead and steel, lead and brass. Polyolefin heat shrink and fire zones commonly use dechlorium plus. If you have button cell, coin cell batteries, you'll have EGDME most of the time. All fine, you just have to declare each component type. And if you have 3 button cell batteries, you just say, I have 3 button cell batteries with EGDME, and use the same declarable component. So you need to get these objects, and you can do it by worst case scenario. And then you basically have a product template and a component template. The product template's counting exercise. What's the product name? what are the parts or model numbers covered by this declaration, what's its customs code, and how much of each of these component types does it have. It has 5 leaded brass parts, it has 20 high temp solder parts, it has 1 button cell battery. And so each one has to call a separate declaration, which is a component template. The product will have a declaration and the components will have a declaration. But these component templates are basically the Lego building blocks of your declaration. It's kind of neat, actually. You can see so for the MRI system, it's like you build the declaration out of different Lego building blocks to build the final Lego MRI. It's the product declaration is built of component templates. Or basically, you can sit there and go, hey, I have in my products, I have 1,500 leaded brass parts. You can create 1,500 leaded brass component declarations in the system, or you can create one, which is much easier to control. One of the worst things about creating separate ones, you may decide, you know what, our leaded brass stuff's all internal, keep out of reach of children, even though it's a common lead warning. Do I really need that? No, you update your brass component template, remove that line, and it repopulates to every declaration you have. So much easier. Or this is all new. And as you do something new, somebody on the outside my world might start pointing fingers saying, hey, I can't believe they have this, that, or the other thing. And you make a change and you review it or you replace the part and you make a change. You just have to change the one template and it repopulates. It's so much easier. If you rely on your suppliers here, I will need your component template for each part you provide. It's going to be very burdensome. Good luck getting it. Getting SVHC data alone is hard enough. Good luck getting it. Good luck getting accurate. And they'll come in a million different formats and none of them will agree. What's a lot easier instead of worrying of the competency level of my suppliers, I just have a leaded brass component listing that I'm okay with. It's not necessarily like, fine art, but it hits all the buttons. I'm happy with it. I control it. Anytime I run to leaded brass, I'm just going to point at the same brass template that I've been using the whole time, and I'm quite happy with it. And if somebody says, you know what, you should change that, you know what I have to do? I have to change that one field, and every single product gets updated. That's awesome. We're big fans here at Claigan of doing the best job possible in the most efficient way. I mean, you could always spend a lot more money in the last 1%. You can always do things wrong. Oh my God, can people always do things wrong? Trusting your supplier data for each SVHC is optimistically naive, is probably the best way I put it. By the way, your supplier sometimes provides some excellent stuff in amongst all the junk. And it often takes even experts like us to filter through and say, junk, 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 good, 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 junk. Ooh, actually really interesting. Junk, 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 good. Tons of stuff missing. Okay, this is what we're going to end up doing. The nice thing about missing data is once you have leaded brass parts, how many do you think you have? I don't know, between 10 and 12. Perfect. 10 and 12. You can use ranges now, and we'll explain that. But these component templates are very technical. So what you really need is a product template, which is really simple. I need the product name, what part or parts it encompasses. If it's a consumer product, you have to list the UPC codes or equivalent. If it's a professional product, you have a lot more leeway. It's like these models. The customs code, article category, is it made in the EU? And then how many of each component do you have? I have this many leaded brass components, this many closed cell foam. Like closed cell foam is like your pool noodle material. The blowing agent's ADCA normally. It's the third most enforced REACH SVHC, believe it or not, is the one in pool noodle foam. So if you have packing foam, for example, that's closed cell, it's high risk. I have 5 silicone components. Do all 5 silicone components have D6? Maybe, maybe not. But as long as I declare the 5, we're good. And if the business is happy with it, we've declared and we're compliant. If the business is really concerned, like, do you really have ADCA in those 2 closed cell foam components? You're like, I don't know. Supplier doesn't know either. I can test for it. It just costs money. If you guys are okay with spending the money, I can do this. So, but as long as you declare, you're compliant. If there's a business reason to do more, it does create justification to spend the money you need to. And then there's component templates, like one for closed cell foam, one for silicone components, and it has all the technical stuff. The customs code for that material type, the safe use instructions, the SVHC concentration. You have to know the materials categories like rubber, elastomer, silicone rubber. It's technical. But the idea is you make one for each type. Like I have one for my flame retardant heat shrink. I have one for external plastic component, UV stabilized. I have one for ADCA and closed cell foam. I have one for lead and brass. Awesome. And every time I run into that, I just point it to the same template over and over again. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I don't want to have to rewrite 30 lead components in one system. I just want to say I have leaded brass 30 times or 20 to 40. Let's go with that. makes your life a lot easier. And so the component templates are very technical. It's a big part of what we provide for you in the first phase, saying here are the Lego building blocks. Now you can build a house. You might say, well, I'm pretty good at building the house, but the guys in the next division aren't so hot. They aren't keen on it. They don't have time. And once we've all agreed on the building blocks, it's really easy for us to do the declarations for you. And so a lot of the technical outputs, this is before you get to the Excel file with SCIP numbers, is basically you have an Excel file of the product declaration, and then you have Excel file of all the component templates, which hopefully the same one for each product. And what it is whether this product uses 9 of your 15 and that one uses 12 of the 15. It's just they have a different number of declarable parts in each one. Then when you put an iUclid, you'll eventually end up with an i6z file. The i6z file is very portable. We can email it to each other. If you put it back into your own iUclid, it'll re-expand, and every component template that's included will also re-expand. So like when we do the declaration for that medical analyzer a couple pages ago, with all those different declarable component templates, all 15 of them are embedded. And once you open up an iUclid, it appears and all 15 component templates reappear. And then other products can choose them. There's also a PDF file. Now, the PDF file has no legal requirements, not part of registration, but the i6z file is kind of a tough read for most humans. Also, you have to unzip it, and it's an XML. An XML isn't for everybody. The PDF is the PDF version of the same data. It's really well organized, and it gives you something you can review with other stakeholders saying, this is what's in our iUclid file. And it's hyperlinked, so you can go to the product, you can click on the heat shrink component, it goes to it, and it shows people what you're saying about it in a format that's legible by humans. It is the i6z file in legible, human-oriented form. PDF is not part of registration. It's just a really useful way to look at what you've done. So you end up technically, with anything you do, you end up with the Excel version of the product, the Excel component templates, and it doesn't matter. It's like, oh, well, we're going to use a process without component templates. Well, actually, you can't. You actually need them. Whether you want to know, whether you make them generic or one per part, all the power to you. But we'll say my laptop exam, if you have a laptop and you have a brass component in there, you can't go laptop lead. You have to go laptop brass component lead. You don't have to go laptop hard drive brass component lead. You just have to go from the product to the declarable component, but you'll need that component template. So whether you're testing or data gathering or the probably more effective engineering evaluation for SCIP, you need the component templates. And somebody can provide you a software package. You still, to gather data from suppliers, you still need the component template. You just can't get around it. And if you want to try to gather the component template information for each supplier, it's very technical. And if you get a couple, well done. But you're not going to be able to finish your files at this point in time. So other changes, by the way, I keep mentioning it. Up until now, when you say, hey, I have leaded brass components, and you say 5, and it wasn't a terribly controlled field, it was 7 or 3, it wasn't a big deal. Now they go, instead of 5, you can say 5 to 20. You can say a range. So if you're not really sure, or individual builds could vary, I sell this laptop. I could sell a laptop like this. I could have different hard drives. I can sell it with an external hard drive or with a mouse, which I include under the same SKU. So I might end up with 2 to 4 brass parts, depending on the configuration. Awesome. Just put 2 to 4. Great. And I don't care whether it's brass connector or brass standoff or brass prong or some word that I don't understand. I like it in quotations. When somebody gives the bill of materials, here, do the declaration. Have you ever looked at your bill of materials for a lot of people? There's no commonality at what level people declare. I mean, they buy the resistor, they put resistor in there. They buy the entire power supply assembly, it says like ASS power, which includes tons of components. It's not really that handy. When we do the evaluation, the bill of materials is an interesting extra reference tool. We really do it from pictures off the bat, where we go from the inside and outside and we walk through it with you. Now, sometimes we have some leftover questions, like we didn't see any silicone parts. Are there any silicone parts in there? But we walk through it with you and explain what the high-risk materials are, using a worst-case scenario. We don't know if this brass part has lead in it, but if we declare leaded brass, we're compliant. So that's the plan. If you don't want to declare the leaded brass, which virtually everybody has in electronics anyways, we can do more work to find out if it is there. But as long as you declare you're compliant, we walk through the pictures. Using somebody's bill of materials, I love the 3-letter acronyms for everything. ASS, PWR, 35N. 100% sure that is. That's some assembly, I think, power, I'm guessing. The BOM descriptions are often not super helpful. Or they use a really technical term for that product type. Going through pictures, and it's a lot easier. Instead of, even stakeholders, same company, often look at the description and go, I have no idea what we're talking about there. The one guy over there really knows all these things. The rest of us don't. So going through in pictures, I'm like, here's the outer frame. This is what is or is not declarable. This is the ink. This is the labels. Labels for the polyester or PVC or metallized polyester or paper. And this is, in each situation, this is why you will or will not have a declarable. And walk through your product. Here's the wiring. This is the cable tie around it. The wiring is PVC, which is high risk for phthalates. We declare phthalates, but you're compliant with the new ROHS restrictions, so you won't have those phthalates, etc. And walk through the product. And declare based on the worst case scenario. Again, the requirements to declare. And the other thing is, no matter what version of the software, you don't have to wait till the end. Any version, there's basically 3 versions of the software. The ones you made in the original version, the current version, will be usable in the version for 2 weeks from now, and it'll be usable in the version in November. It's the only thing that's not compatible is if you create a new file in the November version, it won't be usable in the original software, the one open right now. It's not compatible, which I don't see why you'd bring it back to the old software. But everything has compatibility with the next level. And any file you build today will be usable in the end registration. It might ask for one field change, but they're all compatible. That's a big thing. No requirement to wait to the end. So again, our process, super popular. Off the bat, let's build one together. Look, you might tell us to go fly a kite afterwards, but you'll get a lot of value out of us telling you how to do one and doing one for you. This is how you do one. Everybody's going to try to sell you their solution. Why don't we build one first, figure out what makes sense for you. Every single company we work with, it ends up, the process is a little different because how you have data and information is different for every single one of you. So we build one together. It helps refine not only what the declarables are, not only what the templates are, but it works out the data is going to come from this pathway. Establish the pathway. Now you have the templates, the pathway to compliance. And if you're comfortable, you can build it yourself. And some people really are, actually. But also, we now have the pathway and templates with you. We can just do it for you. And a lot of the technical part's already done, the templates, everything. So it takes work, but it's not mind-boggling because it's all based on building blocks. I have my Lego set. I am just going to build. We've all agreed on the Lego set. Awesome. We've all agreed on the instruction manual for the Lego set. Yep. Awesome. Now to build some houses. And that's that. And then eventually to register. And you're going to want to register yourself. We can definitely web meeting in. That's not a big deal nowadays. And then you register, and then you're going to get back a SCIP number. You want to collect them. Now, you can collect them one at a time, or literally there's a button you push saying export all my SCIP numbers, and it gives you the product information and the SCIP numbers in a file. And you literally take that file and say, hey, Mr. Distributor, we could sit there and have a conversation about what you sell or don't sell of mine, or I could just give you the whole listing, and you can register the whole listing yourself. And this way, you can sell anything we own, whether you do or not. So that's also one of the solutions. For distributors, you can worry about what each part they sell, or you can say, here's all of our SCIP listed products. If you list them under your own name, that means you can sell everything we make. Whether we do or not contractually, this, that, the other thing. Compliance-wise, you can sell anything you want. So easier that way. It's actually becoming more and more of the idea. I could SKU by SKU figure out what you're selling. In certain business, some companies are so big, conglomerates that they separate it by business unit. But if you're going to sell this business unit stuff, we're going to say for the moment, from a compliance perspective, you'll be able to sell anything from a SCIP perspective. Now, for a variety of other reasons, you may not, but at least you register if you register all our SCIP numbers under your name, if it comes out that you start selling that product at some point, whether you do now or in the future, you're already in the system. And if you make an update to say what you're going to say about leaded brass, it will actually update their listing too. It's all interlinked. So you guys don't even have to talk after that. Maybe 2 ships passing in the night. So nice. The other thing here is, so again, what we do, establish the basics. We show you how to do it, and we make one for you. And then we can do them for you. And you'll have the tools. If you're comfortable, you can do them. Like, you'll have the Lego building blocks. You'll have the process. It is technical, though. It's a lot to take on right off the bat. But some people have been living and breathing restricted materials for so long. This is a fun challenge. But realistically, there's a time frame. We can just do it for you. We've already worked out. Your biggest work a lot of times is like, how are we going to silo your products? Because we don't have to create one per product. We give one per product family under specific rules. So how are we going to silo them like that? Perfect. Here's what we need to do the technical side. Well, we don't have complete supplier data. We're okay with that. It's a declaration requirement. We'll leverage whatever they have. If they have something really neat or interesting, we always reinvestigate and unexpected. Most time what we'll get will be not declarable or obviously declarable, let it brass. But sometimes they'll declare things that are not declarables. One of the challenges is a lot of the supply chain has historically gathered data at the homogeneous materials level. And so they often look at the safety data sheet of the original chemical, or they ask the original chemical supplier, like the ink on your integrated circuit, may provide the information in their safety data sheet. Most SVHCs in ink aren't around on the final version. They're very volatile. They're usually solvents or UV curing agents that are generally used up during the inking or curing process. And then it's not the SVHC over the weight of the ink. It's the ink as a chemical that's inked on the chip. It's over the weight of the entire chip. So it ends up being trivial weight. But the way it gets reported to the supply chain is the homogeneous material level of the uncured ink, and ends up communicating stuff down the path that isn't correct. There also a lot of people don't understand the borosilicate glass declaration, why it's not diboron trioxide and why it's not borosilicate acid. Some of the test houses have an error in their, most of them do actually, in their REACH SVHC testing. There is a wash phase. They use HCl. Borosilicate glass is not soluble in acid, but it is soluble in chlorine. So it ends up dissolving out some boron. And because it's soluble boron, the lab will say, hey, you have boric acid, or you could have boric acid. No, you put chlorine in the solution. Pyrex is weakly soluble in the chlorine ion. It's not the acid part of HCl, it's the Cl part that's slightly soluble. And so that's why it's giving you the false reading. So lots of good stuff like that in supply chain. Even people at a certain level of competency have lots of errors. There is no individual test standard for REACH, so a lot of people adopted things, which many have not realized have unforeseen consequences. I think a lot of restricted materials work falls under the category of unforeseen consequences. And then phase 3, you have the files created, whether you create them or we create them. We literally, I wouldn't say email, we can email them to you. We're a little more organized that. We usually set up a portal in our project tracking system where they're all listed by product. And if you forget or you change stakeholders, it's not like in somebody's email somewhere in a closet you have to find. It's actually just logged right back into our system. You'll have a portal just for you, and all of your products are registered there. I'm not registered in the SCIP system, but we have all the files for each. You're going, which ones we do it for again? They'll all be in our system. And then you literally drag drop the files in. You can collect the SCIP numbers one at a time, or literally push a button and say, export me the Excel file with all the SCIP numbers. Awesome. If I really don't want to think about it, I just want to cover my eyes and go la 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 la. If anybody asks me for my SCIP data, I can just send them that file. Here you go. It's got my products and information. Well, I'm not sure which ones this correlate to. Let's just say for the moment that at some point in time, you may sell everything we own. So here's all the SCIP numbers we have. Just put them under your name, and now you can sell everything we own. You can make it more difficult for yourselves or ourselves, and believe it or not, you will have customers that make it more difficult for both of you. But this is a pretty good first level answer. You want this single Excel sheet that you just provide a response and say, anybody asks you, here you go. And 75+% of the time, they'll be happy. And the other 25% will make life difficult for everybody involved. And the reality is. So that's the technical part we most have been talking about. Our process for creating files is well understood. We've created hundreds of declarations. It's always very interesting. And we've lots of people here to do that. It's one of the other nice things here. We have such a wealth of knowledge of people who've done this. We've seen, I won't say we've seen everything. We still get surprised by this, that, and the other thing. The world is very interesting. But we've seen a lot. And almost everything you'll go through, somebody else has gone through already. So it's great to benefit what we're doing. But that's the technical part of it. But it's just part of it. Again, remember the goal is I sell these things. And at the end of the day, I'm going to need a SCIP number for all the things I sell. Now, you could list of SKUs and the SCIP numbers for them. And a lot of them will have actually the same SCIP number, like laptops right in front of us. All this laptop family, which represents, because all the different configurations, 30 SKUs, all 30 SKUs are under the same laptop. If it's a blood analyzer, the alpha and beta Carlos models, well, all the different handler variants are under the same declaration. Or you literally go to your system. What are all SCIP files I've registered? Export. Awesome. Distributor asks, here's the file of everything under SCIP. You upload that file into the system, and it will automatically link you to all of ours. Yes, you may or may not sell all of it, but from a compliance perspective, you now have the SCIP numbers for everything we sell. So You can make life difficult for everybody, or you can just use our master skip list. Here's where it gets really challenging. Okay, awesome. So most people focus on their standard products. Hey, you know what? We make a viscosity meter. Not sure it's a real thing. Yeah, I guess it is. A blood analyzer and a foot x-ray machine. Awesome. And people will spend the effort on those three things. And it could be, by the way, we worked on furniture and guitars and telephones and servers. And we worked on servers the size of my laptop. We've worked on servers the size of a room. We've worked on, bicycles or like cranes that lifts up to the top of new apartment building construction. So everything and anything. People normally focus on their products. What are the 5 product families we sell? Awesome. And that's a lot of what we've been talking about. But if you actually look at the number of SKUs you sell, maybe in a lot of cases, 5% of the SKUs you sell, not by value, by number, are your main products. Then you have your spares, your repairs, your consumables, your kits, your documentation, other stuff you sell. They all count too. The dollar store's in scope. Just because, my system over there is $10,000 and that power cord's like $3. Yep. Got a separate SKU, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it needs another skip listing. You just have to solve it. So we'll talk about how do you solve the miscellaneous category. And the miscellaneous category is going to be the pain in the butt for most people. The standard products, we got it for you. It's not a big deal. Now, how are you going to handle miscellaneous? So the standard process we just talked about works great for standard products. And then you still have to solve everything else. One of the ones, not uncommon, we make this blood analyzer, which has gas tanks. Awesome. The gas is a chemical covered by REACH registration, not scope of SCIP. Awesome. But the tank it comes in is, and it's got a leaded brass top. And so it has to go in the system. Yeah. So we have to solve everything else. In the end, you need a list of, make sure all the things you sell are covered by SCIP numbers. Now, some of them, imagine your product has no SVHCs in it. It doesn't need a SCIP number. It just needs no. One of the big questions we get about spares and repairs, and this goes along the path of people trying to make the life difficult for themselves. Spares and repairs are parts on their own. So how do you resolve all the part numbers? Like I've made this, network analyzer laboratory equipment for 30 years. And this particular model, I obsoleted 10 years ago, but I still provide parts to it. Or I make this agricultural tractor and I still provide repair parts, the ones from the 1950s. Not untrue. What do I do for those? I don't have any compliance data of the 1950 repair parts. So, especially with something like we did last time buy, like nobody knows anything about these things. They sit in the back shelf and hopefully people could find them when they're ordered. So a couple things. Historical parts, spares, repairs for obsolete parts or other products placed in the market before January 5th, 2021. Imagine you have an obsolete unit or you sold a unit in 2020. What about their spares and repairs? So repair parts generally have the compliance requirements of the product they are repairing. So as a general rule through all of EU compliance, the EU is not to apply additional compliance requirements on a unit that's already placed in the market. It was placed in the market in 2020, that unit should not have new compliance requirements in 2021. It's against the entire idea of the single market. So normally in this case, because it's Waste Framework Directive and it's around the final finished product going to the waste stream, the repair parts are included in the compliance requirements of the product they're repairing. So common one people used to CE marking, ROHS. If you sold a unit in 2020 and there's new ROHS restriction in 2021, that unit doesn't have the 2021. It was imported in 2020. It, for the rest of its lifetime, has the 2020 requirements. Same with any spares or repairs for that product. So if a product's not in scope of SCIP, usually it's generally perceived, now good luck finding specific rules on this, that any parts that repair or upgraded are also out of scope. It's contrary to everything but the EU common market to apply compliance requirements to products and their components at a later date. It's not based on retroactive. Now, one of the justifications also on this is, first of all, why would historical spares and repairs be out of scope? First of all, it's contradictory to the single market to apply to the product additional compliance requirements in the future, and parts that repair it are part of that product. Furthermore, SCIP is in Waste Framework Directive in one section, the database section. there are 5 or 6 sections which saying the member states are to ensure the best opportunity to repair products. One of the easiest ways to get around the SCIP thing for historical products is to not sell them anymore. Whoa, you got a new regulatory requirement? We have no idea, so we're just going to stop selling repair parts for our products. That is absolutely contradictory to the Waste Framework Directive. If ever went to court would say, yeah, no, place the market is the product. Anything that would encourage, or more importantly, discourage repair is contradictory to the Waste Framework Directive. So adding new regulatory requirements to spare parts for products already placed in the market is contradictory to the whole directive. Now, good luck finding somewhere to point to. And if it went to the European Court of Justice, which it never will, but if it did, it would be held up like this. This is very much the Waste Framework Directive. Like, literally search the word repair in it. You'll see it over and over again. It is one of the most fundamental elements of the entire Framework Directive. Anything that's done which does not promote repair is going to be contradictory to the whole thing. So it's around the product it's repairing its place in the market date. If it was not in scope of SCIP, neither are its repair parts. Now, how about ones that are in scope? So you are selling ones in 2021. How about their spares and repairs? There is no one good solution. There is no good guidance on this. A lot of different common approaches. The initial approach for a lot of companies is, hey, if this spare repair is part of this upper level product, we're just going to say that SCIP number, the upper level product, includes all its spares and repairs. And if we're wrong, good to know. No guidance on it. Mea culpa. So when do you want us to fix it? 2 years from now? Awesome. Or a year from now? Great. Time. Or group them into families and create risk assessments of those families. Like, why don't we put our brass components together? Can we group all the families? That is quite possible. Not easy, but quite possible. You can group families together if they're already, and try to create individual SCIP files. Like, why don't we create a SCIP file for brass repair components for Acme? And you can do that. The other one is to buy yourself time. Is a lot of companies say, you know what, any spare part I bring in the first half of 2021 are not for 2021 models. They're for products I brought in 2020 or earlier. So they're not in scope yet, and buys them time. And somebody asks, what are all your SCIP numbers? Here they are. This is everything we've registered in the system and everything that applies today. So that's the buy time, justifying that any spare repair I bring in through most of 2021 are not going to be for 21 systems, or the absolute vast majority. They're going to be for 2020 and earlier systems, which means they're out of scope based on the historical product requirement. Will everything hold up perfectly? No. A lot of it's create a good argument point. Spares and repairs are complicated. A lot of companies saying, look, these are all repairs or spares for this product that already has a SCIP number. We're just going to say its SCIP number includes them. It doesn't? Good to know. Nobody told us that. You really should write this down. And then there might be changes in the future. So this is also a very practical element. ECHA hasn't created a lot of files. They don't make anything of their own, so they haven't really got this far. So again, remember, what do you sell? What are the SCIP numbers for all what you sell? Either here's my SKUs and my SCIP numbers, or you export all of your SCIP numbers in the system and have that file ready. If anybody asks, here's the exported file. All you do is you upload it and you'll attach your name. Well, what if I don't sell all of it? Well, we can take the difficulty of figuring out which ones you do or don't sell. But if you do upload them, that means from a SCIP point of view, you could sell any of them. And who knows what happens in the future. So again, our process, the technical side of this, establish the basics. If you haven't reached out to us, definitely do. It's also kind of interesting. You learn things about the world. You're going to look at your hand moisturizer and your hair conditioner in a totally different way, by the way. Spoiler alert. A lot of fun. We'll talk about what the chemicals are. We'll explain what they are. We also understand how a lot of flame retardants work, because we'll explain how they work to explain why they're there and they're not there. And it'll make a lot more sense. So some of the world will make a lot more sense than what's in your product. We'll provide the templates in Excel and the component templates, the Lego building blocks, and we'll create the files for a product. We'll take a product, work it through with you, and create a declaration for it. It only takes a couple hours. Sometimes some leftover questions, but basically it's a couple hours together. You'll learn a lot. We create the file. And from then on, you have the process flow and the building blocks. And we would have worked out with you what's the best way to get there for your data. Everybody's information set, I wouldn't say data, information set, like what's in their product, what pictures they have, what bill of materials, everybody's different. It's amazing. Everybody's different. So we work out what's going to work for you. And then once we've got all that worked out, the process and the templates, we can do them all for you. Or you'll have the tools. If you're comfortable and you like this kind of thing, you'll have the tools too. We can build all the IUclid files for you. We don't do it normally by product. We do it by product family, and you group them together under the worst case declaration concept, and then register. The registration in November, you're going to drag drop the files in. We can web meeting in behind you. Say hi. We'd like to be sociable. You'll drag drop them in. You'll get a SCIP number. But what you're going to end up doing at the end of the day is going to be a little export button. You go, push, and here are all the SCIP numbers for all your products. And you could sit there and correlate to your SKUs, or just say, you know what, if anybody sells our stuff, we can even look at this by business unit. Why don't we just create an export per business unit? And if anybody wants it, we just give them the one Excel file. And the distributor could make life difficult for themselves, or they can just upload it in the system, and then they're compliant. Which a lot of distributors go, wait a minute, I just take this file, yes. I drag drop it in the system, yes. I get back a file and I'm done, yes. What's the catch? I know. And so that's often going to be the best way to do it. Having the exported file available for them, where they just drag it into the system, they get back a file of their own. They may or may not know what it means, but they're done. They're compliant. They got a little thing. Hey, you've registered. You use your SCIP number. You have registered. Awesome. High fives all around, and they move on to the next thing. So again, I need help with this SCIP web demonstration templates. It's also interesting. I mean, sure, I'm in this business and I kind of find this kind of stuff kind of fun, but if you want to talk about what's actually in your product and why it's there, and talk about things in the real world, and how to read the ingredients list of your moisturizer and knowing which is a problem, which isn't, and explaining all that kind of stuff is kind of interesting. And we'll create the declarations with you and establish what the data set is going to be for you. Not only the output, but what's the best way, what's the best process to do it for you based on what information you have. And we're not just reaching VHC information, like product information, pictures. Like some of them, you know what? We have we dismantling instructions. Tremendous actual asset for some people. Have all the details we need to do the evaluation. Some others like, you know what? We've been gathering restricted materials data at this level for so long. Why don't we use this as a starting point? Awesome. Others like, you know what? Everything in our product is repairable or replaceable. Here is the exploded picture of every part in the product. And we'll sit there and you'll ask questions like which ones are lead brass or lead aluminum, and we know exactly what's in our product. We've been making this kettle for years, or this blender, or like, we make gutters, eaves troughing here. We know exactly what's in there. Here's my tables. You ask questions. What's that material there? They're like, oh yeah, we just use 3600, brass. That's what it is, and do the declaration. Everybody's different. So we work out in this phase what the data flow is going to be in a way that gets everything that's needed and doesn't make life difficult. And everybody's different. And then we have all these component templates. Like once we establish the process, it's like, we have 4 of these and 3 of these and 7 of these, attach, export file. And then we're pretty organized how we list it in our project management portal. So we'll send them to you, but you can also go back and everything's listed together. So it's really easy. Often people in this role have many other hats on, and sometimes it's hard to keep track in your head where everything was. So we try to be organized. Of course, you want lab testing, especially if the new ROHS or EU MDR. Really recommend it. Great. We do a tremendous amount of testing. More than half what we do is testing. And if you sometimes we know stuff. Yeah, originally one of the suggestions that are marketing, maybe we should just have a little thing, we know stuff. Seemed a bit weird. But if one of the things we really do with so many companies is we sit down every month or quarter, we discuss what's changed and how it affects you. Like I could sit there and list the paper, and definitely fear in my industry is a big seller where you'll get, messages like, oh, do you know about this upcoming thing? And you think somebody should be talking that deep voice to make it really stressful. No, we talk more specifically about what's actually changed and how it affects you. You can ask questions like, hey, you know what? We don't just make coffee cups. We actually also make the carry bags for them. Like, ooh, the carry bags and straps. That's a big Prop 65 issue. And explain why, go over things. So coming to the end here, I'm not sure where I am for time. If you have any questions, please don't control my laptop. Close my laptop. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit in the control panel, and I'll try to get to as many as possible. I seem to be way over time again. I apologize. I knew that this morning, so I'll try to get to as many as possible. Great question. Will the presentation be available for download? Everybody who registered will receive a copy of the presentation, and we'll eventually have a recording of this, not that long from now, I believe up in YouTube, so you can watch it again if you're so inclined, but you also can slow it down or move to certain sections, also a lot more popular, and ask certain questions. What happens after the Jan 5th deadline? Are you no longer able to make submissions to the database? Oh, goodness, no. You can keep making submissions because people can have new products and all that kind of things. This database applies to any product placed in the market after Jan 5th. The deadline is actually not the submission deadline. The deadline is you cannot place products on the market after Jan 5th unless they're registered in the database if they have to be. So if they have no SVHCs, they don't have to go in the database, so none of this applies. Do we need to use the SSM process if we upload or skip file for a part from an EU supplier? If it's integrated in your product, you would include it in your declaration. Normally, we do it as generic components. If you sell a product, another brand owner, in parallel to yours, it's not integrated, you'd need to use the SSM process. But it's really only for, I'm selling my product with a laptop. We'll say a Dell laptop or a Lenovo laptop or whatever. I'm not including its information in my declaration. I'll need the SCIP number for that Dell or Lenovo laptop. What happens if the manufacturers don't have a SCIP number as they either aren't compliant or have no presence in the EU? Does the entity serving as a distributor initiate the dossier for the project? Good examples are lead acid batteries from China. Great question. So at the end of the day, the poor soul holding the bag, regulatory-wise, is the first importer into the EU. If it's from outside the EU, like the lead acid battery from China, it's the first importer into the EU, and they're legally the one responsible to make sure the registration has occurred. If it has not occurred, they cannot sell. Now, in many cases, they'll need the brand owner, the manufacturer, to do it, to create the technical elements, of which there is no restriction on who does the submission. The importer in, say, Germany, even though it's not the brand owner, can submit the file. Anyone inside Europe can submit the file and get a SCIP number. You may need the manufacturer to do the technical work. If the importer is not the manufacturer, they either have to ensure the manufacturer does the submission and then use their SCIP number, or they'll have to get the file from them to submit in the system so they're compliant. When will we get SCIP numbers from EU suppliers? If they're integrated into your product, I would not normally get SCIP numbers. I would actually get the SVHC information because you really want to be using generic templates. Using everybody else's SCIP templates, you won't get enough data and you'll have the painful variety of what's in there. It'll take you months to not really get anywhere. Is the number of occurrences still an optional field? It has to be filled in, but it's not well controlled. So you can put 5 or you can put like 5 to 20. Our US operations, EU import, sends products to our EU operation, then distributes products into the EU market. The US division plans to submit the SCIP database via foreign user and receive a SCIP registration number. Does our EU operation who serves as a distributor need a separate SCIP number? That's still under debate. I wouldn't use the foreign user. I would just have the EU operations submit it, and then that covers all of your EU operations. Normally, anybody owned by the same parent company can use a SCIP number. It's not well defined in any guidance. Worst case, it's kind of ridiculous if each entity of the same company had to change it, because how do you communicate with the distributors? You can use via foreign user, but I would just use the US entity and EU entity. Like pick one in France and have them submit it. Life's just so much easier. What do we need to be properly set up with ECHA so that when you do demo, we can actually demo in live product submission? Oh, what do you need? A product. We've got everything handled. We have our own interfaces. We'll do everything for you. Because the file is portable, we're not registering, we're creating the file. Anybody can create a file. We can create the file and we just send it to you. And when the registration system's open in November, you can just drag, drop it, or submit it in. But we have everything. We just need to know what product it is. You want to pick a representative product or what type, and we provide you the cost and details. It's pretty straightforward for us. If an article complex objects does not employ any SVHCs above threshold, there's no need for a SCIP submission, correct. Do you have any recommendations about how to declare this information so as to avoid questions to distributors, enforcement authorities, or others? There's no proactive requirement to communicate the lack of an SVHC. What we normally recommend, there's a couple ways. First of all, when the products that do have SCIP declarations, how are you going to communicate that? That method will help dictate how you communicate no SVHCs, whether or not you can do it line by line, and the ones without SCIP numbers just say no SVHC, or you take a different plan saying, hey, here are all the products with SCIP numbers, just register that. So it depends if you list all your parts and have a second column with SCIP number or no SVHC, or whether you communicate with the distributor, here is a listing of all the SCIP numbers, just go with that. So it just depends which way you want to communicate better. A lot of good questions for the slides. Once we have our EU office registered in IUCLID, the registered users in the US can input the info, correct? So that's a password thing. As long as the entity who owns it is European, however, inside the same company, you exchange passwords, is up to you. Because whether or not you're physically sitting in the US or China or Europe, as long as the European entity attached to that password, you can do it any way you want. Can you use the same SCIP number for different SKUs? Yes, within rules. So one SCIP listing can cover many products under a set of rules, and consumer and professional are a tiny bit different. But basically, you have to be able to be described by the same name, same customs code. The worst case scenario declaration covers all of them. So if you say, you know what, the different configuration SKUs, this one can have 2 letterbrass parts and that one can have 4. As long as you either say 4 or 2 to 4, it can cover a range of products. But they have to be able to be honestly described by the same thing. They have to be the same customs codes and have at least the same worst case scenario of declarables. General staffing requirements needed on client side to support Claigan program. The main declarations, very little. We just need somebody at the other end who can provide data. It might suck up a couple hours a week at most of work as we explain things and talk about questions. Where the main effort work would be for yourself is dealing with the miscellaneous category. That's a little more burdensome. We try to make it simple. If you can find an easy way to classify all your jetsam and flotsam of accessories and consumables, then it's really easy. But the actual files, the first meeting is we just need a bit of information. The engineer will work with you on what we're going to use for the initial web demonstration, first declarable, and we'll do it. And it's a couple hours of your time. And then from then on, once we've decided on the process that works with what you have, it's pretty low maintenance on your end. We'll mostly do it offline with some questions. Oh, sorry. Wow, there's over 40 questions. I'm really over time. I apologize. I didn't get your question, which is pretty well the majority of the case here. Please feel free. I'm sorry I went over time, and contact me, and I'll try to answer your question. Pleasure hosting everyone, and I'm sorry I didn't get to everybody's questions. There are a lot of really good questions here, but it was great hosting, and just contact me and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Thanks again, and I hope to talk to everyone soon.